They're just old people. No, they're very old people. Hello and welcome to my review of Percy Jackson, the Lightning Thief. This is going to be Chapter 2, entitled 3 Old Ladies Knit the Socks of Death. And I apologize that last chapter I did not include a title for it. It was called I Accidentally Vaporized My Pre-Algebra Teacher. These titles are kind of funny, and I like them. But yes, it's called 3 Old Ladies Knit the Socks of Death. Before I go into this, I need to actually acknowledge something, which is, holy cow, was I wrong about the year. This was written in 2005. I asked a couple of my friends actually to check the date for me, because I didn't want to look anything up, because like I said with Wikipedia articles, sometimes you go to look something up and then it's like, hey, here's a big old spoiler, and you're like, no! So I asked them to look up the date of this book, of the authorship of this book, and it's 2005. That's the release year, and I was like, wow, I thought it was a 90s book because of the way it was written, but I guess I was very wrong about that. And I also do just want you to bear with me while I'm getting the sort of flow of this back, but I am still sort of getting into the the rhythm of making these videos again. But anyway, 3 Old Ladies Knit the Socks of Death. I liked this chapter as well. Very much just continuing where the last chapter left off. It appears that Mrs. Dodds has been erased from the space-time continuum or something, because no one else seems to remember her, except for Grover. Grover seems to have some inkling of what's going on. He hesitates. There's never been a teacher called Mrs. Dodds, right? He seems to understand what's going on, but it's like he's not letting Percy in on something. I don't remember what the new teacher's name is, but there is a different teacher now that's all the students are convinced has been the teacher from the beginning, right? It's always been this one. Not from the beginning, but for the past 6 months, I think it said. Mrs. Kerr. Yeah, her name was Mrs. Kerr. So, Percy is getting very frustrated with everyone, but I like that the book did not spend too much time going into the various details about all the different ways he tried to, trick people into admitting this or seeing if they're going to slip up in what he considers to be a lie. They didn't really waste a lot of time with that, so I like that, because that could have been just infuriatingly long and drawn out. It was not. But he is getting really upset with this, and he calls one of his teachers a name, and it gets him expelled, basically. They said, you will not be invited back next year. You're going to be moving on to something else. He's still taking Brunner's advice seriously. It's like Brunner is telling him, hey, this stuff could be life and death, right? And so he is taking that seriously, and when he gets kicked out, he's thinking to himself, I don't really want to go out as bad as I could. I don't want him to think that I'm not taking him seriously, so I'll at least try to do well on his exam. I liked that. It is, I can tell it's part of a broader narrative, but I can tell that also the author is trying to convey here different aspects of the characters' relationships with every little thing they can, trying to make those things fit together. Like, I can actually make this part of the story click here so that I can build up this. I like when authors do that. I have seen a lot of stories where things are kind of cobbled together thoughtlessly, and events are just stuck in somewhere to get the story where it needs to go, and I think that's pretty sloppy. So I like that the author's not doing that, keeping everything very streamlined. So he wants to have this sort of encounter with, not encounter, but he wants to basically go talk to Brunner one-on-one and try to get some advice so he can do better. Because like I said, he wants to make sure he ends on a positive note. So he goes down to talk to him, and this is where I know I said this before a couple times, but this is where the weird stuff starts to really pick up. Because he walks down there to his office, and the door is kind of open, but he hears his friend Grover and Brunner talking together, and they're like, well, we have to keep him believing this, and let him, because I think they said he's a kindly one. Yeah, they said he's a kindly one, and we need to keep him focused on this. But, he's sorry, but it's not a big deal. Basically talking about Mrs. Dodds, or quote-unquote Mrs. Dodds, whoever that is. And Percy thinks that he sees this figure that's like really tall, standing in front of the office door with what looks like an archer's bow. And he's like, huh? So then, I forgot exactly what they said, but someone, I think Grover said something really interesting, or not interesting, something very big, and it causes Percy to drop his textbook. I also need to mention here that Grover, I did get the impression last chapter, just because of the way he reacted to the thing with Mrs. Dodds, that perhaps he was some kind of guardian over Grover, and that over Grover. Grover seemed to be some kind of guardian over Percy, and that seemed to be reinforced in this chapter, because he's saying, I can't fail on my duties, like I did last time. And so, whatever he says, I don't remember specifically, but it causes Percy to drop his textbook, and it echoes in the hallway, and he's like, oh crap, I gotta get myself lost. So he goes and, Percy hides in a classroom, and again, he hears these noises, like it sounds like a horse walking or something. And he sees the figure pass in front of the door again. But then the conversation goes back to normal. And don't really remember exactly what the transition is, but I like that scene. I can picture it. This book isn't too big on visuals, but I can get an appreciation for what the feeling of the situation would be like. It's not like when I read some authors and they're very visual with painting every single detail, like, the amber light spilled out from the thin slit on the office door, and an echo through the hallways full of lockers, and it's not really like that. But it is good at keeping things short and sweet and conveying the point. And so I think that is exquisitely done there for what it needs to be. Then it moves on to when Percy is expelled, or not really expelled, but the end of the term, and he's going to go back and take a Greyhound. But he's like, oh, it's so weird. Grover actually gets to go back with me. I thought I was going to have to say goodbye to him. I think it's totally intentional. And then Grover's looking up and down this Greyhound bus that they're taking back to their homes, and Percy says, looking for some kindly ones, and Grover about jumps out of his skin like, oh, this is just, kind of the worst spy ever. I get the impression he's some kind of guardian, and he is basically, I don't know, maybe Percy's some kind of god, and his memory isn't there yet, so he's just kind of in charge of guarding these people, kind of like there's a certain Disney movie where there's a character like that, just in charge of guarding the younglings, kind of. That's kind of a supernatural being. So Grover strikes me very much in that way. And he starts to say, like, I need to protect you, and then Percy's like, from what? And again, this didn't really drag on too long. I liked how, in this part, they get interrupted by the bus basically, screeching to a halt. And it didn't really feel like it was just unnecessarily gratuitous there. So they step out of the bus, and they're in this side street, and there are these three weird old ladies knitting two giant socks, which is, I've never read anything like that in a book, I gotta tell you. Three old ladies knitting giant socks, and it causes Grover to have all this anxiety, and he's like, oh no, please tell me they're not looking at us. And he's like, the old lady is knitting the socks? And he's like, I wonder if those socks would fit me. And Grover's like, don't joke about that. So I don't know what that's about. I'm guessing it's some kind of I've seen this kind of in sci-fi too, with like it's some kind of projection type thing where different people can see different things, because Grover does ask him what he saw. I'm guessing Grover is the only one who saw what was actually there, and people like him can see what's actually there. Maybe Percy is some kind of like half-human type deal, and that's the reason why he's not aware of these things. Kind of the half-human magical character. That's a pretty common trope I see in some things. I think there's a couple shows I like right now where there's like a half-human magic character. But yeah, so then they snip this wire, and it's like, and he said, I could hear that, I had a feeling I could hear that through 4 lanes of traffic. So apparently it was like a very loud thread snipping noise. This is not your normal everyday thread. This is advanced thread. So they snip that thread, and it's like, And they get back on the Greyhound, and he's like, what's the big deal? They just snipped a thread. And Grover's like, it is a big deal. And he's like, does it mean I'm going to die? And he said Grover looks at him like he's already planning his funeral or something like that. So, this is a pretty short little thing. I actually listened to it twice just to make sure I could take notes the second time. I'm hoping these chapters aren't going to be like very transitional, like very middle of the book type feel, because then I won't have a lot to say about them. I like books where each chapter is kind of its own thing. I think, and I know I always mention Stephen King, but Stephen King very much, and the Harry Potter books, that's something else I've already mentioned. Those books tend to be more like that, where each chapter feels very much like self-contained, like, oh, there was a big thing that happened in this chapter. But, it is the beginning of the book. Maybe it's a situation where I'm just not giving it enough time to develop into what it is. I'm just being too judgmental of it at this point, because, I don't know what's going on yet. Sometimes, some TV shows and some books, it's like you jump right into it right off the bat, and you're like, okay, I know what I'm getting into. But some of it, it's like you have to watch it for a long time and have confidence that it's going to get better, or at least more interesting and compelling, to know what's, so you'll know if you're going to stay or not, and what kind of thing you're getting into. The first chapter very much did do that for me, with the teacher turning into the pixie dust. But this chapter seemed more like, okay, now this is a slow burn. Now we're just kind of going to take things slow so you can figure it out. And to the book's credit, I haven't really figured things out yet. Not that I am a person like, I always figure things out. I'm not saying that, but I have figured out, I think, enough of the kind of thing they're doing, but there are no strict answers yet. There are no, okay, this is exactly what's happening. Because, like I said, I don't usually read this type of genre. I don't usually read this sort of mythology/fantasy book. The closest thing I really have read to that would be, the Chronicles of Narnia. But even that is just an allegory for something that already exists. So you're not really going to get as much free-form mythology exploring that you're going to get with this kind of thing. So, but yeah, I liked it. This didn't really feel like a whole chapter, though. I almost kind of wish I would have done this review for 2 chapters instead of 1 chapter. But who knows? Maybe the next chapter will start something else that's completely different, and it'll cut it off halfway, so then it would make no sense for me to do this chapter and the next chapter. And I am trying to do chapter-by-chapter reviews, even if they're really short. You'll remember that if you watch the It series, then I did even for some of the shorter interludes that didn't really have much, I did some reviews of those. So anyway, okay. Yeah. I predict that, like I said, I think it's pretty obvious at this point, but Grover is some kind of guardian, which is weird because when I read The Stand, or when I listened to the audiobook, it was read by someone called Grover Gardner. And now I'm saying Grover Guardian, and it reminds me of Grover Gardner, just in case you wanted to know that. But I think Grover is some kind of guardian. I am picturing the teacher Brunner like some kind of, I'm going to say like he's like a centaur with a bow and arrow. That's what I think he is. That would make sense. And maybe the wheelchair is some kind of extension of that, because it's more, you know what I mean. And, oh, I completely forgot to mention this. I'm glad I was dawdling around and I mentioned this. There have been weird things continuing to happen with the storms, like, planes going down, or big tornadoes, or things that are shattering windows in Percy's room. I still think, the book is called The Lightning Thief, so I still think perhaps that the teacher disappeared and is this sort of antagonist. Maybe it's not the teacher. Maybe the teacher was just some small part of the antagonist, or maybe the teacher was like just one manifestation, or some kind of pawn used, and just like some kind of automaton used by the bigger enemy. But since the teacher was saying in the first chapter, like, you thought you could hide from us, and then was thwarted, maybe it's like that RPG situation, like with video games, where you face the enemy in the first few minutes of the game, but it's like a faux battle, and then the enemy knocks you back to the beginning of something, and you have to come back to eventually face them again. Maybe it's that kind of thing. So, except for in reverse, because Percy's the one who sent the enemy away, apparently. So, I don't know. we'll figure it out as we go along. But I like this chapter, but like I said, it felt very much like a placeholder. Hopefully we'll get some more exciting stuff in the next chapter. And it is the first book. It is still the first book. And no one even knows I'm doing this, by the way, yet. I mean, I'm recording this a month before you guys are going to see this, which is really cool. I've never done that before. Where I do something like an entire month ahead of time. That's a really cool feeling. So, okay. Yeah. Until next time, I will see y'all next time. If you have a comment, drop it down below. I will not be reading them yet, of course. Number one, because it has been a month since I have done this. And number two, I might have someone field the comments if I can find someone. If I can't find someone, then I'll just read them whenever I feel like I'm far enough into the series where someone's not going to spoil them. But I don't know. I don't know if people are going to try to spoil things from the end of the series. I don't even know if I should be saying that or not. Who knows? Who knows if I'm going to read comments or not. But I mean, my It series didn't really have many comments, so I don't know if this will have many comments or not. We'll see, though. Until next time, for real this time, I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.